the impetus for writing this article? Like what event happened? What travel happened? Like just walk us through the impetus of it.
Yeah, well, to go all the way back, I started getting really interested in like the planetary impact that Bitcoin mining would have, the social impact, the planetary impact, how it would change our relationship with energy and electricity. And that was really kindled and inspired by actually Ross Stevens' letter that he wrote to the shareholders at Stone Ridge in 2020. And, you know, most of that letter was talking about, obviously Bitcoin as a money, as a currency, as an investment. But there was a part of it that talked about Bitcoin as kind of like civilizational infrastructure where people used to kind of settle and do activity where there was water. And that Bitcoin mining might make it possible for them to do it where there's other kinds of energy sources that are currently like basically isolated, stranded. And I thought that was very powerful. And it inspired me to do some earlier writing on Bitcoin and how it might impact renewable energy and the environment. And I wrote this 3 years ago, and it went into my book, Check Your Financial Privilege, where I looked at how the Virunga National Park in the DRC in the Congo had these dams that were built by foreign donors that were not able to use their capacity. Basically, the park was only able to use a small percentage of the capacity of these dams. So there's a lot of curtailed, wasted energy. And some enterprising Bitcoin folks went down there, started up some conversations. The park started mining the Bitcoin, I think, in 2020. And obviously, it's done extremely well for them. So it's now become like vital infrastructure for the park, for all the animals and plants the biosphere protects, and the 5 million people that live in the area of the park. So that captured my imagination. And I was just looking at videos of just like the miners in the middle of the jungle. I was like, this is crazy. They're turning flowing water into capital. This is awesome. So I had an opportunity to get involved with the Africa Bitcoin Conference. HRF was a kind of a founding sponsor of the event a couple of years ago. And this year's edition was coming up. Probably about a year ago, I was talking with my friend Eric Hersman from Gridless, a company that does off-grid mining on mainly hydro and geothermal in East and Southern Africa. And Eric I've known for a long time, but he kind of reached out to me several years ago, and we reconnected around Bitcoin. Like I'd known him from his previous career doing humanitarian work and social enterprise, and basically like information and internet infrastructure in Africa. That's what his career was in. And I knew him from that world. And then all of a sudden, like we realized we were both Bitcoiners, and that was like an amazing moment. And ever since then, we were like, collaborating and doing stuff. And I thought it'd be super fun for Gridless and HRF to team up to maybe visit some of the sites that they had operating in East and Southern Africa, maybe bring some friends of ours from different backgrounds. I won't be specific, but we'll just put it this way. Some of these folks are Bitcoin developers. Some of them are entrepreneurs making tools for people to use Bitcoin in Africa and elsewhere. Some of these folks are investors or philanthropists. And then some of these people were like educators or journalists. And we put together a nice little group and we went down there. And I think it just so blew my mind. I mean, I kind of knew I knew what I was getting into. I knew that it would be very profound. I think that's the word I was using.
Mm-hmm.
I knew it would be very profound, but I was not prepared for, I guess, the sinking realizations that you have when you go visit these sites. And in particular, we visited two sites. One was a micro hydro project in Malawi, which, by the way, is a very remote place. Like everybody in Kenya that we were talking to, they were like, "You're going to Malawi? Like what? Why would you ever go to Malawi?" Like Malawi is very, very remote place. And then we saw a geothermal site on the shores of a lake in Kenya. And both were very different, but equally blew my mind in terms of like what I think this is going to do to the world. And it helped me kind of understand that in almost all cases, not Bitcoin mining is a waste of energy. And I think that's obviously a deep kind of thing to realize.
You almost have to say that again, because that is such a profound statement. I'm serious. That is such a profound statement.
So not Bitcoin mining. Not Bitcoin mining is a waste of energy.
Yeah.
Which is the exact opposite of what the mainstream media and governments want you to think, because they've been telling us for a decade plus that mining Bitcoin is wasting energy.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is that almost every single power generation source in the world does not use all of its capacity all the time. And often it cannot sell the excess. In Western countries and in advanced societies, in advanced energy infrastructure places, it usually can sell more of it, right? Because we have grids and energy markets. But in a lot of the world, in what we would call the global majority, where most people live, there really aren't like energy markets and grids. Like in Africa, for example, like there is no grid. There's no grid. So if you've got a site on the shores of a lake in Africa, I mean, just picture this, it's in Kenya, where there's geothermal everywhere. I mean, I was talking to the foreman of this geothermal plant, and this plant was, I think, like a 1.4 or 1.5 or like a two megawatt plant, relatively small. But in the region, there's up to a gigawatt of geothermal that's being harvested in this one area of Kenya. And the guy was telling us that there's probably 10 gigawatts of potential energy there, but just no one's figured out a way to, no one's figured out a way to capture it yet. There's been no incentive to do so. But you have this beautifully clean, consistent geothermal power, which is basically they dig a hole in the ground, goes down 2,000 feet or so, or a little more, and the stuff that comes up out of it powers a turbine. I mean, this is very sustainable. It's going to deliver the same amount of power for the next 50 years. And the thing is, they build this thing, and then a company buys power to run a water pump on the shore of the lake, which takes the water from the lake and moves it to a field to irrigate the field to grow flowers to sell. Kenya is the world's largest exporter of cut flowers. I'm sure there's like a tulip joke in there somewhere, but the point is, a lot of those flowers you see in supermarkets in Europe are grown in Kenya, actually. So this is a big business for Kenya. And you think about the mechanics of it. So I'm sitting there at this water pump, and I'm thinking, like, wow, there must be thousands of these all over this country, industrial power generation sites similar to this, where they're powering water irrigation, right? And you're thinking about what's in front of you, like you're sitting at this lake looking around, and there's this beautifully consistent geothermal power coming down to power the water pump, and it delivers a base load all the time. And then the water pump, though, is not consistent. Water pump's using power sometimes it's off, sometimes it's on, sometimes it's pumping, sometimes it's not. But that doesn't change the fact that there's always the same amount of energy, of electricity rather, being delivered to the pump. So the rest is waste. Okay, so there's this enormous amount of waste that is happening. Less so perhaps in Western countries, but still, like at night, like there's all kinds of waste even in rich countries, but especially in rural areas and poorer countries, the amount of electricity waste is so profound. It's so staggering. And then I'm looking to my left, I'm looking at the solution, and I'm looking at this gridless hut, which is all custom. The whole thing's custom designed. Everything's built by Africans. Everything's made in Africa, except for the miners themselves. And you're looking at this hut. It's got a Starlink on it. It's like totally solar punk. You're like sitting on this lakeside, and it is the Bitcoin network buying 100% of the electricity that the water pump is not using. So you are using all of the electricity that the Earth is creating through geothermal energy in this one particular instance. This is the Bitcoin network eliminating waste and turning it into capital. And this is extremely powerful. So you're watching this thing happen, and Eric's showing me on his phone the actual data in terms of, like what times of day are they getting, a lot of power to run their miners, what time of day are they not, are they curtailing, etc. So it's very dynamic. They write all the software for this. It's 375 kilowatt operation. So it's basically like they're basically eating about, let's call it, a third of the base load on average every day, which again, roughly otherwise just would have been straight up wasted. But again, it's not linear. It's like changing dynamically.
Yeah.
You have to be clever about how you do this. But basically, the point is that you're going to start seeing Bitcoin miners adorn every kind of possible power generation site almost anywhere. I mean, and the gridless folks were really great at explaining to me, both Eric Hersman, Philip, and Janet, that like in the near future, if you're building a variable demand site, like you will build it with a Bitcoin miner, because otherwise you're going to be losing money and you won't be competitive. This will just be a normal thing that happens with a variable demand power generation site. Like it's just, you will have a Bitcoin miner that goes along with it. It'll be part of the infrastructure. So you start to understand this is going to just be part of infrastructure for energy everywhere. And that's what I didn't realize before going.
So Gridless has been really leading this charge in Africa. I haven't really even heard another name of an entity really building.
There's actually a Green Africa Mining Alliance. So Gamma and Gridless is part of it, and there's tons. I mean, there's a lot happening.
Really?
Look, there's a lot of interesting things happening in Bitcoin right now. So there's the attention's on Wall Street, right? But there's there's big sites coming online. There's smaller sites coming online. There's people doing stuff in Ethiopia. There's stuff happening in Nigeria now that the government over there basically changed the law so that states inside Nigeria can decide energy policy instead of the federal government. So that's opening some interesting doors. So this is just going to take time. But basically, Gridless is leading the charge in terms of, I think, showing that you can have a profitable business that is going to grow and scale all across, Africa. I think there's hopefully going to be a lot of copycats. They do a really good job. They have an incredible team. They're going to be hard to beat. But they're picky about their sites, things like that. But they are very committed to this to solving a problem. I mean, yes, and he told the audience that he's actually paying less money today to the grid for the energy to heat his spa, and he's earning Bitcoin. So this is where you start to really realize that this could be helpful everywhere there's any kind of need for heat. For like basically an ASIC is a space heater, and we were discussing this in Africa as well, because like what may make sense in a cold climate, there'll be different uses for that heat in a warmer one. So for example, in Malawi, in Bondo, what they were, because you put your hand out the back of the micro hydro station where the ASICs are, and it's a searing blast of heat. So well, what do you do with that? It's free. It's an externality, right? So there's two crops that are really grown there. One is pineapple. So the original idea was to just like dry the pineapple, which obviously is helpful, makes another business. Or the other one is tea. So it's not a tea plantation. And one of the things you do with tea after you harvest it within the first day or so is you got to dry it and use warm air. So they have like a building there that's like like literally a tea processing facility that just dries tea leaves. And it's like that could be the waste there could be eliminated. Like the Bitcoin mining can be drying the tea leaves is an idea. So we'll see. But I mean, I think that I've seen people dry seaweed. I've seen people dry wood with the externality. Obviously, a lot of people heat their homes, their entire cities in certain parts of the world that do this now. I think that eventually, as we learn more about this, that will be part of the deal. And like, it would just be like crazy talk to do any sort of heating or cooling or whatever using, like not using ASICs. Like basically the guys in Virunga in the DRC, I met them. I just got a chance to catch up with them at the Africa Bitcoin conference in Ghana before I went to Kenya. And they're telling me by March 1st, so like a month from when we're talking now, they're going to have this new setup where basically they were talking with the park rangers, and the park rangers were going to buy like $200,000 of industrial heaters to help heat the cocoa beans that they process there. Because currently it's crazy. They just like lay them out on the ground in the sun and it takes a long time, and like animals come and eat them. And it's a huge mess, tons of labor. So instead, they're going to buy this heater, and these heaters would kind of heat them in batches and be much more efficient. And they were like, no, just buy $200,000 of ASICs, and then we will just heat the cocoa with the ASICs. That's what's going to happen. So this is going to happen. This is happening, and then the chocolate that they make from the cocoa will be sold, and it'll be like Bitcoin powered chocolate. I predict it's going to do well. So I just love this. Like everything about it is great. Like the externality of the mining will change depending on what part of the world you're in. Like it'll depend on what your community needs. I just think it's fascinating.
If a policymaker from Africa was listening to our conversation, what would be your advice to them right now?
Well, again, just like, look, no one wants to cut fiscal, raise taxes, inflate, borrow from the IMF. Why don't you try this? Like, figure out a way to finance this one-time thing, and research how much energy your country's wasting, and do it now, and start mining. And you will have a very powerful recurring source of income that is probably totally disconnected from the world's power narrative in terms of the price of electricity. It's probably be off grid. It'll be probably baseload power. It'll give you sovereignty. It'll allow you to hedge against all sorts of things. And one day it'll allow you to buy anything you need without having to like negotiate with people. You'll just have whatever, the premium currency. So I think that that's very important for people to do in America too, though. Like America should be Bitcoin mining all of its wasted energy and use that to fund public works. I mean, this is why I think it's like the real Green New Deal is Bitcoin, right? Like if you want, like Bitcoin is this is how the government should be getting the revenue for doing public works, not through debt monetization. So anyway, that's the idea.
If you were going to go into one of the towns where these Bitcoin miners and energy hubs are set up, and you talk to 100 people inside the town, first of all, are they even aware that the Bitcoin mining is taking place? And if they are, what would be the general consensus that they would have in reference to it taking place?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I have a small sample size. I just visited a few sites, but generally speaking, no, the local community doesn't really know. In the case of Bondo, it's the power company that knows, because the power company in the Bondo case used to still subsidizes the energy so that it's not like insanely expensive. Power in Africa is can be 3 to 4 times the price it is even in a place like California where it's already expensive. The idea of mainly being like, let's say you have a generation site that produces, I don't know, like 5 megawatts or something like that. That's a lot. But let's just say for the purposes of this example, but you only have 1 megawatt of demand. Well, then really to make yourself whole, you end up having to make that energy 5 times more expensive than it might otherwise be. Bitcoin mining comes in, buys the other 4 megawatts, and then the price that everybody pays, that the people who are using the 1 megawatt pays, goes way down. So it makes energy cheaper for people. People do not understand this. This is super important.
So when I'm hearing that, and I'm thinking about Gridless is a huge beneficiary of
for the community.
This. But
they're also
are they giving back? in a way that makes it more harmonious for the people as opposed
Right.
to
So,
just benefiting from
so
that.
the power company is called Mega down there in the Bondo area, and it was really like this guy who's responsible for the area, the surrounding area. It looks like Yosemite. It's insane. It's this incredible mountain range called Mulange and Mount Mulange, and the area is just stunning. I think it's like the best rock climbing in Africa or something, but it's very remote. Not many people there, and he's kind of doing everything by himself. So he was subsidizing some of the power for people, so that it wasn't like 90 cents a kilowatt hour or something. He was bringing it way down out of his own pocket, though. It's not sustainable. So in comes Gridless. Gridless's miners buy 100% of the hydro power that Bondo does not consume, which of course, even if they design it like perfectly and like, during the daytime, the Bondo folks are eating close to 100% of the hydro. Well, what happens at night? Like the town sleeps, the river doesn't sleep, right? So you always have extra. And then there's seasonality, right? There's big storms that come in, big cyclones that come in, dump tons of water, and there's so much surplus. So Gridless is going to buy all that, and they pay a fee to the power company, and that's really important revenue for the power company because that's revenue it didn't have before. So Gridless wins, Gridless makes money. The power company wins, they make more revenue, and the people win because the price of energy goes down. And now the power company can afford to expand. It can afford to hook more homes up and actually get the rest of the community online in a way where no other donor was like, that just wasn't going to happen with donations. So this is how Bitcoin like brings electricity to people. It's absolutely beautiful to see come about as a result of this. And I think that the other part about kind of Africa helping Bitcoin is the innovations that are happening out there, like Gridless, for example, are like just would never happen in New York or in London or Chicago or LA. It's just, we don't have the same sort of lived experience issues, like the same problems, just we don't have the same problems. And the other big one is lack of access to the internet, right? So 600 million some odd Africans also don't have access to the internet. A lot more have internet poverty or whatever. Like they rarely have data. So people use feature phones. How do you use Bitcoin? I mean, think about people who are listening. Well, how do you use Bitcoin? Well, we usually either use copy and paste or a QR code to like use Bitcoin. Well, a feature phone can't do either of those things. So you have all these people who can't really use Bitcoin. So, and then you have all these people who don't have data or internet. So the question is, well, how do you solve that problem? So this incredible guy named KG or Kogatso, who grew up in a township in South Africa, right? Like under apartheid, basically, invented this incredible innovation that allows people to use Bitcoin without the internet. And this is just so profound. So he's now got about, I think, 12,000 users across 7 countries in Africa. And it uses a protocol called USSD, which is similar to SMS. And basically you just like send a message to a number and it spits out like a decision tree type thing. And you can like buy, sell, like it's integrated with Bitrefill. You can like buy all kinds of stuff on the internet. There's a lot of interactivity with like Azteco. So you can go to a store with cash and you can top up your the company's called Machincora. You can top up basically your Bitcoin account with cash, like through a voucher system. It works with M-Pesa. Like it's totally integrated and it's amazing. So people are using Bitcoin without the internet, like at scale. It's pretty insane. Like I'm not sure that Wall Street is prepared for this. Like I don't think they understand this. And the crazier part is that, well, today it's a custodial Lightning wallet, but that's not how he wants it to be for various reasons. Like if he goes to Vodafone and says, "Do you want to partner?" They're going to be like, "Well, we don't want to hold any funds for our customers, right?" Like so the self custody piece is actually important. Well, how do you do that without a smartphone? Well, they figured out or realized that the SIM card can just be the signing device. So you have all these people with dumb phones or feature phones, whatever you want to call them, no internet. Well, guess what? They can all be self-sovereign Bitcoin users and they can self-custody. So this is a new feature they just sort of rolled out as a pilot this month, and we'll see where it goes. But I just think that's incredible. So you can be like a fully self-sovereign Bitcoin user with no internet. It's wild. So that's the other piece of it is the like power generation and also financial freedom, right? So and the innovations coming out of Africa are going to make Bitcoin way stronger. I mean, if you have, I mean, who knows? But in theory, you could have many thousands, if not millions, of people self-custodying Bitcoin, in Africa. That obviously makes Bitcoin stronger. And again, the power conversation, like just gigawatts of decentralized off-grid power powering the network. Like in a world where,
I mean, so many self-reinforcing incentives.
It's weird,
right?
but in a world where like in the West, we might be lazy and privileged and like a lot of centralizing forces right now, right? Like ETFs, like